Everybody loves seeing those dividend payments roll in, but a dividend investor's worst nightmare is hearing that their dividends may get cut. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how to judge the safety of your dividend payments. And this actually may be one of the most important videos I've ever made. I think there's a whole lot of people who think they understand dividend safety, but they really don't. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. So I'm going to be taking you step by step on how to judge the safety of your dividend payments. And I've created an entire spreadsheet so that I can clearly teach you how to do this. And to start out, we are going to be keeping it simple. We're going to be looking at the payout ratio. The payout ratio is fairly simple. You can see there's two different formulas. We have payout ratio is equal to total dividends divided by net income, or an easier way to look at it, in my opinion, is going to be the dividends per share divided by the earnings per share. So let's go ahead and look at an example. We'll jump into my stock valuation spreadsheet and come up here and plug in IBM and hit enter. And you can see all of this data will load in. Now, if we come over here, we can see IBM, according to this spreadsheet, has a payout ratio around 336%. So if you see this, your first thought is going to be, oh wow, that is way too high. These dividend payments are definitely not sustainable. Well, let's go ahead and analyze this in this other spreadsheet I just made. So the first thing we need is the dividend for IBM. So let's go ahead and jump over to Seeking Alpha. We're currently looking at IBM, and if we look at the summary tab here, we can see the dividends paid right here, 664. So we'll jump back over to our spreadsheet and we'll plug in 6.64, and then we need our earnings per share. And by the way, there are ways you can automatically import this into your spreadsheet, but for this video, I'm just going to manually plug it in. So if we jump back over to Seeking Alpha, we can see our earnings per share listed right here for IBM, forward looking 9.48. So let's jump back over to our spreadsheet, plug in 9.48. So now we have the two metrics we need to calculate payout ratio. And you can see again the formula right here. All we are going to do is come up here and plug in equals, and we're going to take the dividend per share and divide it by our earnings per share. And so when I hit enter, you can see we actually come to a payout ratio of 70.04%. So not nearly as high as the 336% that we saw a little bit earlier. So why is that? Well, you can see what we just plugged in is the forward-looking earnings per share and the forward-looking dividend payment. So what we really need to look at now is look at the trailing 12 months payout ratio and see if maybe that's where the 336% is coming from, because there's a pretty big difference. So to get the trailing 12 months dividend, again, we can go over to Seeking Alpha, we'll click on dividends, and we can click on dividend history. And all we need to do is, when we scroll down, is we need to add these four last dividend payments together. So you can see we have 165 plus 165 plus 165 plus 166. So let's go ahead and jump back over to my spreadsheet, and I've already done the math, and that comes out to 6.61. So just a little bit lower than that forward-looking dividend payout. Now we need our trailing 12 months earnings per share. And again, you can find that in Seeking Alpha, but I'm just going to go ahead and plug that in. And the trailing 12 months earnings per share was only 197. So again, we will plug in that same formula. We'll come up here and take the dividend and divide it by our earnings per share for trailing 12 months. And we come out to 335.53%. That is where our payout ratio right here is coming from. And obviously that is a pretty major red flag, but at first glance you would think there's no way they could possibly be paying out dividends. But when you look at the forward-looking payout ratio here, you can see it's only sitting at 70.04%, a whole lot safer than you would originally think. Now, both of these are very important metrics, and I highly suggest you look at both of them. But I think one of the most important ways to look at payout ratio as well is the free cash flow payout ratio. I think this is definitely something everyone should look at. So let's go ahead and walk through this and talk about how to project if the dividend payments are safe using this method. So the first thing we're going to need, again, is our shares outstanding. And I'll go ahead and plug it in. You can find this in a lot of different places. Obviously, I like to use Seeking Alpha, but here's our number. We have 907 million shares outstanding. Now we need to know what the quarterly dividend payment is. And so like we already saw, 165 is the quarterly dividend payment. So we're going to come back to our dividend spreadsheet and we'll plug in 1.65. And now that we have these two metrics, we can see the free cash flow needed for the dividend payout. Let me go ahead and correct the way I spelt that. And again, now we can see how much free cash flow we need for our dividend payout. And that's a simple formula. We'll come up here and take our shares outstanding and multiply that by the quarterly dividend payout. So in quarter one, we can see they need about $1.4 billion, $1.5 billion in free cash flow to be able to cover their dividend payouts. Well, before this video started, I looked up what IBM's free cash flow was in Q1, and it was only 1.3 billion. So let's see what that Q1 free cash flow payout ratio was. We'll come up here and take this number and divide by this number here, and you can see their Q1 free cash flow payout ratio was 115%. Cash flow is really important to look at because obviously earnings can be manipulated in different ways, whether you use generally accepted accounting principles or non-generally accepted accounting principles. Free cash flow will not lie to you. So that 115% definitely a little bit higher than we want to see, but some companies produce more free cash flow in later quarters in the year than in the beginning. So let's go ahead and look at the 4-year projections for IBM. Again, we need shares outstanding. We can just come up here and copy that. We'll plug this in here. And now we need our yearly dividend payments, and that's going to come out to $6.60 per share. So now we can find the free cash flow needed for our dividend payouts again. We'll come up here and do equals. We'll take this number and multiply it by our yearly dividend, and I'll hit enter. And now we can see the free cash flow needed to cover the dividend payout for the entire year, and it's close to $6 billion. And I looked up what IBM's projected 2023 free cash flow is, and it's coming in at around $10.5 billion. And again, that is just a projection. That's important to keep in mind. But we'll come up here, do equals, we'll take the free cash flow needed for dividend payouts, divide it by the projected 2023 free cash flow, and hit enter. And you can see the free cash flow projected payout ratio for IBM is 57.02%. So that is a long ways off from the 336% payout ratio, which is clearly for the trailing 12 months. So this is a quick video, and I just wanted to point out how important it is to look at the different methods for calculating payout ratio and understanding which each one means and why each one is important in its own right. I think both of these have a lot of value and are always definitely worth looking at, but it's always important to look at that free cash flow payout ratio as well. Again, I'll make this spreadsheet available on my Patreon page if you're interested in using it. Also, my stock valuation spreadsheet and all my other spreadsheets will be available on Patreon. But also, if you go over to Seeking Alpha and we come up here to dividend safety, you can see it's going to give us a lot of different metrics as well, and hopefully this helps you better understand what you're looking at. So for example, right here, we can see our dividend payout ratio for our trailing 12 months showing around 336%. We now know how they calculated that number because we did it for ourselves. We can see that's the payout ratio for the trailing 12 months. If we jump back over, we can see other metrics such as cash flow payout ratio fiscal year 1. So just a lot of different metrics that hopefully you better understand now. I think this is extremely important to understand because just simply looking at the trailing 12-month payout ratio, or really just any single one of these, is not going to tell you the full story. It's important to look at free cash flow projected ratios, sometimes look at quarterly, but also look at the trailing 12 months and just the straight up payout ratio. There's so much value in looking at each of these different metrics. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. I'll try to get to them. Seeking Alpha is still running a huge discount at my link in the description, so if you're interested in using this, I definitely suggest you check that out. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.